Awesome.
Welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Louisville Real Estate Investor Meetup Group. As for those of you guys who are tuning in for the first time, we actually started this group back in 2019, and we slowly started growing in person for quite some time. And right before the pandemic, we probably had about 80 to 100 people showing up to talk about different real estate related topics. And since then, we've converted to an online format, and hopefully we'll be getting back to in person here soon at the end of the month. But just to start off, I mean, we're super excited to host Jordan today. He's kind of a guru when it comes to laundromats, which has a real estate component to it, but it's definitely something that, you know, as I mentioned to Jordan prior to hopping on, that it is something that is interesting as a business model. And, you know, I think that there are quite a few people on the call and people who are watching on Facebook that may gain some benefit from learning about those as an opportunity to potentially increase your cash flow. So, Jordan, really thank you for coming on. And Luke, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I just want to say, Jordan, we like hearing from people that have all sorts of different businesses. Laundromats is obviously a relatively passive business, and it's something that we're all interested in. And I think hearing from somebody that's young and into the business is awesome. So appreciate you coming on, man, taking the time out of your day and away from your family to spend with us. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, I'm looking forward to chatting about, I always love talking about laundromats with people, but, hopefully I'll give you a ton of, real valuable information, but I promise to be real about it too, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about owning laundromats that have gotten people into, not the greatest situation in the past because they came in with unrealistic expectations. So, but I appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to talking with you. And I'm a big real estate investor too. I love real estate, but laundromats also, I think it has something pretty unique to offer, especially for real estate investors. So
yeah, I mean, there is a real estate component towards it. So I think it's definitely appropriate for this meetup. So I guess just to start out, what we usually like to do is learn a little bit more about the speaker, really. So can you tell us a little, high level view of who you are and, what got you into, investing in laundromats?
Yeah. So I'm actually in California. So not in your market, but by the power of Zoom, I, get to hang out with you guys. So I did not start off with any aspirations to be a laundromat owner and never even considered it. And I for 15 years, I was a youth pastor and a pastor, and that's kind of my background. And when I finally, through having a family and just, the growing family and the time needs and stuff, got to a point where I was like, okay, I don't need to be doing this, vocationally anymore. Maybe volunteer is a better role for me, and was trying to figure out what to do next. And we had a little money in the bank, and, my idea was to go buy a condo in Hawaii and go live in Hawaii and rent out our house. But my wife's idea was to buy a laundromat. So of course we bought a laundromat and not a condo in Hawaii, which, was the right decision, but it was a tough one to make. But yeah, that's kind of how we got into it. And my wife's idea behind it was, wanting to put our money towards something that, was going to make us money while not necessarily tying up all our time. We had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time. And, just looking to be able to spend more time with them and as a family and doing the things that we love to do. So that's kind of how we got into the business.
That's awesome, man. That's one of the big things I like to talk about is time, and how, time is, it's one of the only things that you'll spend and never get back. It's self-limiting. Yeah. Everybody's the same, and when you really understand how important the use of your time is, and making sure that you maximize with basically not working for hourly pay or not working for your money. You're not spending time for a paycheck. You're spending money to make a paycheck, Right. And it really opens up all sorts of different opportunities in the future. So I love that piece of your story. Can you tell us about when you're looking at that laundromat versus the condo, how much money are we talking that you have to put down, to spend up front? What are some of the upfront costs with buying a laundromat, getting started in laundromat? What kind of costs are we looking at?
Yeah. So, I mean, that can vary widely. It's the age old answer of it depends.
Right.
And it really does. I mean, there's laundromats that are netting, $500,000 a year, and those obviously are going to cost you a pretty penny. But, there's also laundromats that, are netting you like 10 grand a year, and you can get into them for 50 grand or 100 grand. And, one of the things I love, so I always say that, I consider myself a real estate investor first, because that's what I was exposed to first. That's what I got into first. But I always say that laundromats are a great investment for real estate investors. There's a lot of crossover between laundromats and real estate. But one of the things I love about laundromats, well, two things really, is that the creative financing opportunities in laundromats can't be matched by real estate. I mean, everybody's always, I'm on Bigger Pockets. I'm on, I'm listening to the podcasts, everybody's always talking creative financing for real estate, and it's true. And it's out there. Seller financing, it's out there. Private money, it's out there. But for laundromats, actually, seller financing is pretty common. And that makes it very attractive for a lot of people. And not only that, but financing for like new equipment and stuff like that. A lot of times, if you play your cards right, you can get 100% financing on that stuff. So the financing options, which a lot of real estate investors, utilize that financing to leverage, their gains. I mean, you can do that in a lot of creative ways that are pretty common with laundromats. So I love that. And the other thing I really love about laundromats is the average laundromat cash flow. It's just far and away better than the average real estate deal, even in the best markets. And the reason for that is the way that they're valued. So even if you're buying a $100,000 laundromat or a $300,000 laundromat, if you're looking to buy cash flow, it's really hard to beat the cash flow of a laundromat. And the reason is because it's valued a little bit different than traditional real estate. So, and we can get into that if you want to also.
Yeah, that's actually something that I think would be great to know about, because again, like you said, it is going to be valued slightly different than real estate. From my understanding, it's based on multiples, but could you kind of elaborate a little bit on how you would, so if I was looking at a laundromat opportunity and I had some numbers in front of me, how would I get a feeling for what this type of laundromat would be worth?
Yeah. So, just probably preaching to the choir here, but just so that we're all on the same page, to have something to compare it to, residential real estate, if you're looking for like a single home rental up to a fourplex, whatever, they're based on comparable sales, right? What's similarly priced in the area, and that's how you're going to determine the value. Commercial is based on a cap rate. And even now, I don't even know if you can get a 10% cap rate. Where can you get that where you're at? I don't know. Like, it's hard to find that.
It'd have to be distressed for sure.
You have to find deals.
You'd have to find that. It'd be really hard. But a laundromat's based on a multiple of the net operating income, which, just so we're all on the same page, is your gross income minus expenses before your like loan payments and taxes, right? And so the multiple is going to be somewhere in the 3.5 to 5 times multiple. That's the typical range. Right now, they're starting to creep up a little above 5 for those like pristine laundromats, just because, similar to real estate, in a lot of places, there's a lot of demand and not a lot on the market right now. But 3.5 to 5, even if you're buying at that 5 times multiplier, all cash, and this is unleveraged returns, right? That's a 20% return on your money, right? And that's like the top end, right? That's like right. New equipment, a pretty established store. You're looking at a 20% unleveraged return on your money, which is just really difficult to do year one in a real estate deal. So in terms of cash flow, it's tough to beat a laundromat. Now, it is a business, and again, going back to being real, like, it is a business and you are dealing with people, so there will be issues that come up. Not often, but they do happen. Machines do break down. People do complain about stuff. So you either need to deal with those, or you need to have systems in place to deal with those things when they happen, which I obviously recommend the latter. Have some good systems in place.
Yeah, for sure. So, with real estate, I know that we were just talking about finding deals and like and ways that we find deals around here is, obviously talking to people, referrals, cold calling, sending mailers, whatever. What kinds of ways are there to find deals for laundromats?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the similar ways. In fact, I just right before I jumped on here, I was recording a podcast episode with a guy who he had huge success with mailers in the Atlanta area. He's actually from San Diego out here,
Yeah.
and he's buying across the country with a partner. And so they did mailers, and they sent out 84 letters. And he just typed them up and then hand wrote, to the owner of, and then put the address, 84 letters, and he got 15 responses back. And from that, 3 were like really solid leads. So, I mean, those numbers, and this was, he just bought it in February. So this is like recent, right? Even in this kind of tight market. So mailers work. The way that a lot of people find them is they go online and just search laundromat for sale near me. Right.
Right.
But a little bit of secret sauce on that one is if you are looking online, obviously it's similar to real estate, right? Looking on the MLS, you can find deals there, but they're harder to come by. And the way it works with laundromats, even similar to real estate to a degree, is when somebody wants to sell a laundromat, typically most owners are going to go to a broker. And what that broker is going to do is put together a package that has all the information, and then they have their own buyers list, right? And so they're going to email that package to their buyers list, and their investors are going to have first pick at that laundromat. And if all of their investors pass it over, that's when they get thrown online. So what you're seeing, not always, but a lot of times what you're seeing online is the deals that have been passed over. It doesn't mean it's not a good deal, but it's probably not the best deal out there. Otherwise it would have already been snapped up. So the secret sauce is to go search laundromats for sale near me. And yes, check out the laundromats there, but more important, go look at who's listing that laundromat and call that agent or that broker and let her or him know that you're in the market for a laundromat. Let them know what you're looking for and get on those buyers list so that you're getting first peek at those laundromats as they come through the system before they end up online. So that, and then the other thing that works really well is to just, whenever you're driving around, you see a laundromat, pop in and just have a conversation with the owner if they're there, and let them know that you're interested. I've had multiple laundromats offered to me, just, from popping into laundromats and talking to owners. And I always tell people, have a stack of letters in your car. So whenever you pop in, even if you talk to that owner, leave them with a letter that just introduces yourself, lets them know that you're looking for a laundromat to buy. And then another little bit of secret sauce that I found works really well is to offer them something like, hey, even if you're not interested in selling, check out this article or this video or this podcast episode or something that might help their business. Because it kind of triggers that reciprocity thing, but also it's just like a good thing to do, right? Like help them with if they're not interested in selling, like help them do better. Right. And it's not going to hurt you. It's, it's just going to build goodwill, and who knows, maybe they'll share some information with you that's going to help you with your business. So, it's also going to help them remember you when they are ready to sell. So it's also a good way to lead gen. So so those are the best ways I found to.
Well, I like the idea. I mean, I guess you technically could just go online and search laundry. You don't even have to search laundromats for sale. You could probably just search laundromats, get a long list, and then just start mailing all the laundromats, right?
Well, yeah. If you're going to do a mailer, what I suggest is go on Google Maps or Apple Maps and just type in laundromats, and whatever ones pop up, just make a list of those addresses and mail them. Yeah.
How often, if you actually stop in, how often do you think an owner is actually there, or maybe just even an employee or somebody? Is it common to be there all the time pretty much, or how does that work?
So there's a couple different models of laundromat. So there's an unattended model, which basically doesn't have anybody there ever. And a lot of times either the owner will hire somebody to come in during the day or in the evening or whenever to come in and just clean up the place. It's amazing how quickly laundromats can get destroyed. I always joke that the first time one of those dryer sheets hits the floor, it's like a free for all. Like people feel like, oh, the dryer sheet's on the ground. Oh, we can do whatever we want now. Here's chicken bones on the ground. There's diapers that like,
Chicken
I don't
bone.
know, man. Like people just get crazy. But you know, like once a day, you know, you have somebody come in and clean up. So that's the unattended model. There's a partially attended model where somebody's there for strategic hours. Maybe you have like a drop off service where people can drop their laundry off and you do it for them. So maybe somebody's there, you know, in the morning hours and in the evening hours when the drop off and pickup times are. And then they also kind of keep the place clean. And then there's a fully attended model, usually for some of the bigger stores, where somebody's there all the time. So yeah, so to answer your question, it's hit or miss whether an owner is going to be there or not. And that's a good thing, you know, right? Because
yeah, I mean, I don't want to be there. So
yeah, if you're looking to buy a laundromat, you don't necessarily want one where the owner has to be there all the time, right?
Or maybe it's an indication that it's managed not correctly too.
Yeah,
Right?
that's exactly what I was thinking. An owner that might be like done with, like, if I'm working there every day and I want to maybe be done with it, then a way to be done with it is to sell it. So if you find them there, they might not have systems in place that they should have to make it a more lucrative thing for them to hold long term. That's my thought. So
for sure. And I will say with what you were referencing with brokers, there's different types of brokers. In this case, I'm assuming it's a business broker that you'd be reaching out to, because they're the ones who would compile all the data of the business and everything else and drop it on or send it off. Yeah.
Right. And you might even have in your area laundromat specific brokers, which is, you know, even better. And even, you know, and sometimes you'll have just regular residential real estate agents that are listing laundromats. Maybe it's, you know, like a friend of the family or something. That's one exception where you might be able to find a really good deal online, is if it's a residential real estate agent listing a laundromat who doesn't have a pre-existing buyers list, because that's not what they do. So you can still find a really good deal there with that. So
that's awesome. That's great advice. So when you're looking at some of these opportunities, right? And let's say that you start getting some deal flow, you kind of implement some of the strategies that you mentioned, and then you find some that come across your desk, quote unquote. What are some of the things you need to consider as you're going through the process of trying to purchase it? So maybe your due diligence items, really.
Yeah. Well, that's the real trick to this business, right? Because, you know, it's a cash business by and large. More laundromats are starting to implement card systems or app payment systems instead of coins, but still 90+% of all laundromats are coin operated systems. So they're cash businesses, and verifying the income and expenses is really the trick, because it's not an exact science. It's pretty tough to do. So I always say there's 4 pillars of buying a laundromat, and the 4 pillars are, you know, verify the income, verify the expenses. You want to determine the trajectory of the business. You know, is business going up? Is business flat? Is business going down? And wherever it's at, the question becomes why, right? Why is it only flat, or why is it going down? Or why is it going up? You want to understand those things. And then the 4th thing is, how can I add value to this business? And kind of going back to one of the things you were saying, one of the beautiful things about this industry is it's still a mom and pop industry. There aren't really, there's some franchises starting to come out now, but they've tried in the past and none have taken. I think things are a little bit different, and maybe 1 or 2 might be able to pull it off now. We'll see. But there aren't any huge nationwide players in this business. And so there's a lot of inefficiencies in terms of management, in terms of accounting, even in terms of just selling it and valuing a business. There's a lot of inefficiencies, which means one, it can be more difficult to determine what a good deal is, but 2, if you can determine, there can be really big opportunities there. Especially, and we can talk about this after, but especially if you get a spot with the real estate, there can be really good opportunities to create some value there. Okay. So going back though, before we talk about that, cause I'm really excited about that. I love that part of it. But what to look for is, you know, determining how much money is coming in to a laundromat is tricky. And I'll lead by saying, if you're thinking about getting a laundromat, it is well worth your time and effort and money to find somebody who knows the business to help walk you through your first due diligence, or maybe even your first couple of times. Because if you buy a laundromat correctly the first time, really the sky's the limit for you. I mean, if you're looking at a minimum 20% return on your money unleveraged, like, you can roll that into more investments for your portfolio pretty quickly. But if you buy it incorrectly, it can be really difficult to dig yourself out of that. And I'm saying that from experience, because even though the original vision buying my first laundromat was for that time freedom, it did not work out that way for me. It was a really hard experience, and I lost a lot of money early on, learning some really, really expensive and difficult lessons. Right. And so I always say, get somebody who knows what they're doing, another owner, a consultant, and don't rely solely on somebody whose income depends on you buying that laundromat. So, a broker can be a great resource for you and a great source of information, but really they're only going to get paid if you buy a laundromat. Right. So I wouldn't solely rely on a broker in this instance. So a couple of quick ways that you can try to verify. And I always say you're never really going to pinpoint the income, but really there's a range of how much money could be coming in, and you're trying to get as narrow as possible of a range. So a couple of things you're going to do is, one, you're going to request taxes and bank deposit statements. A lot of owners aren't going to give you that. So, you can ask for it, but you may or may not get it. Another thing that'll happen often is you'll get taxes, but then the owner will say, it says it's making this, but really it's making this. And that's pretty common in this business. So it's not necessarily a deal killer, but I always tell people, if somebody is willing to lie to the government about how much money their laundromat's making, they're willing to lie to you. So you got to be real careful about your due diligence. So you're going to request those. The other thing that you can do is something called a coin count, where you're basically going to go in for a series of coin collections, where you're going to collect coins from the machines over a series of weeks. And that first week, you're going to go in and clear out all the quarters from all the machines, blank slate. And then you're going to take a water meter reading out at the water meter, outside the building or in the sidewalk or wherever your water meter is. And the reason for that is you're going to do that every time to see how much water is being used. And you're going to compare that to previous water bills, because what some people will do is they'll leave water running in the back to make it seem like more is being used. It's really easy to try to deceive somebody who doesn't know what to look for. Right. And then, so every week you're going to take coin collections and see how many quarters basically were in all the machines each week. And you're going to compare the water usage to the bills, and you're going to compare the coin collections to what the owner says it was making. Now, there are ways to kind of deceive a buyer. So that's what makes this a little bit tricky and a little bit scary. A couple of things you can do. If there's a camera system, I always recommend to coaching clients or just clients of mine, ask for access to the camera system. That's a deterrent for somebody doing something shady. And again, just having somebody experienced who knows what to look for can help you find red flags and can help you determine what questions to ask. So there's a couple things to do, but it really is, that's the trick of getting into this business, is figuring out how to figure out how much money a store is making.
Oh, for sure. And then what's the time? Because you were mentioning every week for a certain amount of time. What's usually the time frame? Is that like 3 to 6 months, or because it seems like it's obviously what you determine with the owner, but generally do you recommend longer versus shorter time periods as far as
longer's better? Yeah, longer's better, but there's a point of diminishing returns too. I recommend at least 4 weeks if you can do longer. I mean, it really depends on why somebody's selling, how much time they have, how impatient they are. There's a lot of, in the transactional process, there's a lot of competing interests between the buyers and the sellers. Even, even like if you're buying the real estate, even how much you're going to value the real estate versus how much you're going to value the laundromat, there's some tax implications for both the buyer and seller, and the implications are competing, right? So, you just have to kind of strike that negotiation where you can feel, again, you're just trying to narrow that range, right? The more data points you have, the narrower you can get that range. But at some point, you're not narrowing it enough to make it worth continuing on. So at least 4 weeks. If you can do 6 or 8, even better. Probably if you're out past 3 months, you're probably in that range where, at least for the coin collection, there's other reasons you might want to go longer, but the coin collections, you've probably got enough data points.
Cool. You mentioned, we were talking about systems earlier, and managing the laundromats. I guess we're kind of curious, like, so, you finally find one, you buy one, whatnot. What kind of systems do you put in place personally to run your laundromats and kind of, I guess, try to take care of some of those maybe inefficiencies that previously existed to make them more efficient? Because that's, I completely agree. Anytime there's inefficiencies somewhere, there's opportunity to improve it, make money. And I think laundromats is a mom and pop business, and it's one of the few that's left out there, I would say. I mean, from what I can tell. So it's very intriguing to me. So what kind of systems are we looking at?
Yeah, well, I'm always looking for, I had a podcast guest come on and he said something that I thought was brilliant. He said, in everything that you do, like a lot of times what happens when you buy a laundromat, you end up putting some significant time up front. You're probably putting 20 hours a week the first, few weeks, learning your business, meeting your employees, trying to figure out what in the world you're doing. Like I remember getting the keys for the first time. I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? Right.
That's the best. That's the best feeling in the world.
I know. So, you're going to put in a little more time, but eventually you want to put in less and less time. Right. And I got, I had a guy come on the podcast. He owns 37 laundromats, and he's not putting in more than 10 hours a week unless he wants to. If they're buying a new one or something like that, he's putting in more time, but running his laundromats, he's just got good systems in place. So you're looking for redundancies in everything that you're doing. So, early on for me, I had 2 cleaners who would come in, once a day. I have one attended, fully attended, and one unattended. My unattended laundromat, I have 2 cleaners, who would come in, once a day. They would kind of switch off, and one of them quit for whatever reason. And then I had one cleaner, and then that one cleaner couldn't do 7 days a week. So then I was cleaning, and I was like, well, wait a second, like, this is not why I got in this business. Right. So like having more employees doing shorter shifts so that you can kind of cover when there's needs there is a big thing. Even like things that'll happen, like your change machine, runs out of quarters. So if your change machine's out of quarters and people come and they don't have quarters, they're going to leave and go somewhere else. So, having systems in place where you have 2 change machines, or you have a deal worked out with a neighboring store and you leave $50 worth of quarters with them. So that if customers can go next door, get quarters, it's not a, pain for that other store owner. Or, just thinking of some of these places where things can go wrong. Another thing that started happening is if a customer had a problem, they would contact me. And a lot of times it was like, hey, a quarter got stuck, or, I put my money in and, I tried to open the door and it made the machine go out of order or something like that. And it's something where obviously you want to take care of that problem. But it's not something that's urgent. Like I need to hop in my car and drive 45 minutes to my laundromat to go give you $2 of a refund. Right. So, first of all, one thing I did was I just kind of wrote it into the job description of my attendant, who I always hired people who lived close by. And so in their job description is to take these calls, and they just know what to do. If it's something like that, they can either just shoot me a text and I can Venmo or Zelle or whatever a refund, or if it's somebody who's a little bit older, I can mail them a check. But I don't have to be dealing with the customers that way, and the attendant can deal with it. And a lot of times they know the people because they live in the neighborhood. So just things like that, where there's problems that can come up. Even something as simple as having a plumber. So if there's, a drain backup, or I've had floods in my laundromat where the drains back up, and I show up and there's, 2 inches of water all the way through my laundromat, and it's still packed and people are just wading through the water doing their laundry. And I'm like, holy cow, like this is insanity. And so, having to like, at that point, I just am feeling so much pressure, and then having to like try to find a plumber who can come out and who's, got good reviews on Yelp or Google or whatever. And who's, just have that in place, And so if there's a problem like that, you can call the plumber and meet them there. If you need to go at all. Right. So things like that can help just simplify things to where you're not having to hop in the car and do things. You're not having to cover shifts. You're not having to deal with the petty issues that come up that they're not petty to the people, but they're easily solved, that anybody could solve.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and you've learned that kind of through experience, which is unique, right? Because you start seeing recurring things occurring, you're like, oh, okay, well, that may be a system, because if you don't create a system, then you're gonna have to continue to deal with that over and over and over again. So
Yeah,
the fact you've had that experience, I mean, you've been able to identify what can be a system, what may not be able to do, and then you kind of delegate those responsibilities to the appropriate parties. That's awesome.
yeah, absolutely. And I highly recommend learning those systems from other people.
Yeah.
Like learn from other people's problems and mistakes. It's a big part of why I started Laundromat Resource and the podcast, because I'm like, man, I spent all this time and money learning these expensive lessons. I should just share them with other people so they don't have to learn them the way I learned them. Right.
Oh, for sure.
And then I found out that there's a lot of other people out there that have learned a whole lot of lessons that are willing to share them. Right. So learn that way. It's way better.
That's awesome, man. So you mentioned earlier on in the talk that you want to find opportunities where you can add value to the business. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that means, especially in the laundromat space? Because I know a lot of people obviously on the call have more experience on the real estate side versus the laundromat side.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of overlap again with real estate. I mean, even just improving the look of the business is going to help, but similar to commercial real estate, maybe as opposed to residential, the value of the laundromat is based on the net income, right? So if your laundromat, we'll just be conservative and say your laundromat's trading at a 4 times net income value. That means for every dollar of income you can bring into your laundromat, you're increasing the value or the equity in that business by $4, right? So even something small like adding an ATM machine, adding a bubble gum machine, adding, a massage chair, coin operated or dollar operated massage chair, a claw machine, even small things like that maybe add 100, 200, $500 a month of income. Well, if you can add $500 a month by adding a claw machine and a massage chair or an ATM, well, that turns into, not only does that turn into $500 extra a month in your pocket or $6,000 a year, well, that also is going to translate into 24 grand of equity in your net worth, bucket there too. So now, your equity doesn't grow quite as fast as it does in real estate, which is why I think laundromats and real estate work well together. But the extra $500 a month is not bad. And I'll take 24 grand of equity any day. Right. So, so there's little things you can do like that, like adding, those little things to your store. But really your main business obviously is, your laundry machines. Right. So thinking about ways to, one, get more customers into your door, and to keep them coming back by helping them have a good experience. Those are going to be your highest returns on your time invested, right? In your thought process. So, doing things like upgrading your machines to newer machines. People like new shiny machines, right? They want to come do their laundry at the laundromat that has new shiny machines. So that can add a lot of value to your store. because people are going to come there and do their laundry there, right? Doing things like adding seating areas that are comfortable, or adding something for kids to do. Like, think about who's doing laundry, right? A lot of times it's moms and they have toddlers in tow, right? And those toddlers are running around like crazy. You know, even when I bring my own kids to the laundromats, right? They're running around, riding around in carts, climbing on the folding tables, climbing into dryers, right? It's hard to wrangle them.
I love this concept.
Yeah. It's hard to wrangle the kids while you're trying to do the laundry, and there's other customers there and you don't want your kids to bother the other customer, right? So like, put yourself in those shoes. So if you can solve that problem for a mom with little toddlers running around, you know, maybe it's having an iPad station, or maybe it's just having a little library section or blocks or toys or whatever, that's going to keep kids occupied. Well, guess what? A mom with a toddler or a couple of toddlers, if they have to drive a little bit further or even walk a little bit further with that kid, but they'll know that kid's going to be occupied, then they're going to do it. Right. So adding value that way is by and far your best way to do it. And another kind of example is to add a fluff and folder, like a drop-off laundry service where your attendants do the laundry for people. The margins on that can be pretty high. And some people, their drop-off service business far outweighs their self-serve business. So that's another kind of way.
Is there less competition in that, would you say? Or is it about the same?
There's less competition, but there's more and more. And in fact, the industry is moving towards drop off, and even more so pickup and delivery, which is becoming more and more common. And especially, I mean, COVID has really ramped that up, especially on the residential side. The commercial side has suffered on that a little bit because a lot of businesses have either been shut down or been pinching pennies. But the residential side has really ramped up on pickup and delivery.
Speaking of pickup and delivery, did you guys ever do anything with like Airbnb owners, pickup and delivery, or do you know people that do that stuff? Because I mean, I've got a couple Airbnbs, and that's just something that came to mind.
Yeah. So not everybody will do them. And the reason for that is because a lot of times Airbnb owners need a very tight turnaround time.
Yeah.
And that can be really tough to do, especially if you're dealing with a store that does any kind of volume.
Right.
And if they are willing to do it, a lot of times it can be cost prohibitive for the Airbnb owners because they need to charge a little bit of a premium to basically bump them up in front of the line. So that's not for everybody. Some people do them and have figured out, again, it's like the systems, right? If you can solve the problem, you can have a good business model. So some people have figured that out. But a lot of people, it's just not worth their time.
I could see where the turnaround time and the tight windows could be a problem for people. So
yeah, especially if you have people checking out, you know, at 11 and checking in at 3. You know?
Yeah, and then the people are like, "Can I stay until 11:30 or 12?" And you're like, "It's like 10," and you're like, probably not." Yeah. They're like, sure. "Okay, we'll be out by 11:15." It's like, no.
Yeah, sure. If you want to hang out with the next people, yeah.
So one of the reasons that I think all of us own real estate is for the tax advantages, but I'm sure laundromats have tax advantages as well. What kinds of tax advantages are we looking at?
Yeah, I mean, similar to real estate, you know, you can write off your equipment. I mean, there's a whole bunch of itemized things that you can write off. Your equipment you can write off, even your fixtures. You got coin changers, you got boilers, even like your folding tables and your carts. You can write. Is
there advanced depreciation on that?
Yeah,
like where you can write it off all in 1 year or 3 years, or what's the depreciation schedule for that stuff?
I would say talk to your CPA about that.
That's all right. So that's a good answer.
I don't know. I know that there is advanced depreciation on it. I just don't remember off the top of my head what it is. And don't want to get anybody too excited.
Yeah. I love advanced depreciation. That's the only reason.
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, legitimately, I try to buy something every single year because I basically wipe out my taxes by buying something every year, essentially. And I've been able to do that somehow for the last like 4 or 5 years. So, so there's that, but also it's a business, right? So you have all the normal business advantages too, where you can run expenses through your business, you know, pre-income, right? And so you can really take advantage of that if you set it up correctly. And again, like talk to your CPA about that, but there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. That's really beneficial, to where you can run your laundromat, even or even at a loss a lot of times, while you're making money. So
That's awesome.
legitimately,
Right.
and
Right.
I do want to say, like, a lot of people do try to get in the business for shady tax reasons.
Yeah.
And I just say, listen, you don't really even need to do that, right?
Right.
If you hire a good CPA, and they're going to wipe out your taxes anyways, like, or the majority of them. Like, you don't need to be shady about it. So,
And that's my whole point with all this stuff is if you're investing in the right things in the right ways, there are ways to write off so much on your taxes that you shouldn't really need to cheat on it, right? I mean,
yeah,
because there's benefits to owning real estate, businesses, all that stuff. So
totally. It's not worth the risk, and you just don't need to do it. So I did want to say that.
That makes complete sense. So in the case, let's say that, you buy a laundromat, and let's say it's been even for a while. Maybe there's been some operational deficiencies, or maybe they just haven't been marketing effectively. Like, what are the best ways that you've found to be able to help grow the laundromat business so that, you're able to add the value? I know you kind of talked a little bit about, incorporating some sort of things to be able to, keep toddlers' attention, but are there any other types of methods that you've found?
Yeah. And a lot of this is going to sound like duh, of course, but I don't know if you've ever been to a laundromat, or if you've been to laundromats lately. It's not, I guess, as obvious as maybe it might seem, but number one, like, keep the laundromat clean. Like, it's crazy how many laundromats you go into and they're just dirty. Like, who wants to come to a place to clean your clothes
that's
and
dirty.
then leave feeling dirtier because the whole place is dirty, right? Like, but so many laundromats are just dirty. And that has to do, I think, a lot with a mentality that has been pretty prevalent. It's starting to change in the industry, but where owners have just had this mentality of, like, I just want to come and I buy a business and I come once or twice a week and I collect quarters and I leave. And I don't ever put anything back into the business. And after starting, my podcast and talking to owners from all over the world, the best owners that I've talked to are the ones that reinvest in their business. And they're the ones that are succeeding. And a reason you see these, there's a term out there called zombie mats, right? It's these, they're businesses and they're running, but they're not really thriving, right? They're not alive. But the reason you see all these is because those are owners who bought a laundromat and just let it continue to deteriorate and never reinvested into it. And then they try to dump the laundromat or sell it to somebody else, even though there's not really a whole lot of value left in them. So reinvesting in your laundromat is huge. It's really a key to success in this business. So keeping it clean is one thing that you can do to add value. And the other thing that seems really obvious, but if you go to laundromats, it's not as obvious as it seems, is keep your machines running, right? They're not making you money if they're not running. And even if you're not doing a high enough volume that it's really going to matter, when people see broken down machines, it's kind of like this cancer, like the machines next to it. Like, people don't want to use those machines because they're like, well, that one's broken. This one's probably right behind it, or whatever the reasoning, right? Like, it's kind of this cancer that spreads throughout your store and you start losing customers. So keeping machines running is another good one. But another thing about the industry is that there's not a lot of laundromats do any marketing at all. And so if you can even do a halfway decent job, or hire a company to do a halfway decent job of maybe doing some Facebook ads or some Google ads, you're going to be light years ahead. Having a good website presence, super easy to do, pretty cheap to do these days, but a lot of laundromats don't have a website or have a really outdated one. And then the other thing is, like, just claim your Google My Business. That's where a lot of people are going to go to Google Maps or Apple Maps and search laundromat near me if they're looking for a laundromat. The way you show up on there is have a Google My Business account and keep it updated. That's it. And it's easy to do and free.
Sweet.
That's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think we're about to open it up to questions in a second, but what sorts of places, I guess, would be good for people to go to in order to kind of learn more about laundromats? Like, I know there's probably not a bigger pockets of laundromats, but what types of resources are online?
That I am building the bigger pockets of laundromats. I'm out there. But,
he is.
Laundromatresource.com is what I'm doing. So we got a ton of free resources on there. And especially if you do the free member account, it's free and we don't spam you or anything like that. But if you do sign up for the free member account, there's a member resources tab in the menu there. And there's a ton of resources there that are free, tools, informational resources, all kinds of stuff. So that's one place. Another is the Coin Laundry Association. I think it's coinlaundry.org, I think. They have a bunch of resources there also. And I got a buddy who he was actually on the Bigger Pockets business podcast. His name's Dave Menz, and they kind of coined him the Laundromat Millionaire. And so that's his brand now, Dave Laundromat Millionaire Menz. He's got a YouTube channel and a website. He's got a bunch of good information, and that guy really knows his stuff. He's an awesome guy.
Yeah, I like the pun coined.
Yeah, exactly.
I caught that one. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you did because I didn't. So.
Awesome. All right. So I guess now we kind of wanted to give us a little bit of time to open it up to questions in the audience. I'll also be checking out, obviously, the Zoom chat and the Facebook chat. So for those of you guys watching on Facebook, feel free to type away and we'll try to get your question answered.
Yeah. Yeah. Glad to answer any questions that are out there.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay? Thanks,
Yep.
Jordan, for doing this. I'm in Louisville here with Luke and Raphael and I guess everybody else on the call maybe. I bought a building in a small town, and I've got 2 Airbnb units up top and a little cafe that's part of this building. And I've got a few hundred square feet of space that I'm looking to put in a laundromat. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why is because there's 2 laundromats in this town, and one is almost completely defunct. And I talked to the owner about it, and he's just not interested. Some of your comments about just collecting, and I think he just ran it into the ground the last 6-7 years. Anyway, it's a small space. And so I think what I'm looking at doing, and I'm still evaluating, and this call couldn't have come at a better time, is putting in 8 units total, 4 washers, 4 dryers. Mm-hmm. Do you have any experience with a very small laundromat like that? And the reason why is because I have a need for it with in particular my Airbnbs and the surrounding 2 miles around there could use a few washer dryers.
Yeah. So I don't own any real small ones. Number one, let me just give you this. Shoot me an email at jordan@laundromatresource.com, and I will connect you up with a good buddy of mine who owns some smaller laundromats, and he will give you some really, really great advice. He's a good dude. So that number one. Number two, one thing that you're going to want to check into, and this may not be an issue or it could be a very big issue, is one thing called impact fees. And basically what impact fees are is a fee that you pay to the city to basically connect up to the water and sewer. And that by itself could either make or break your deal. For example, I have an investment group. We go out and either buy or build laundromats and buy commercial real estate here in Southern California. And we were looking at a place where we were going to build out a laundromat down here. And when we looked into the impact fees, this is a 3,500 square foot laundromat. The impact fees were going to be $390,000. And that's just money that you hand over to just have a thumbs up to be able to connect to water and sewer. That's not to actually connect up to. It's just like, here's $400,000. So it can be as little as $0. It could be a couple $100 a machine. It could be thousands or tens of thousands a machine. So you want to look into those impact fees. That would be through the city or the county. It really depends. so you want to look into that. And then the other thing that you'll want to do is find some people who can help you with buying the machines. So there's a big decision to make whether you buy new or used, and you can go either way. But having somebody help you run through those numbers will be a big help for you, because it's such a small laundromat, right? You're not going to be able to do huge volumes, most likely. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Speaking of machines, so I looked at and I don't know as far as machines go, the Speed Queens, and I've talked to, the local rep, well, he's somewhat local, he's in Tennessee,
right?
And the price blew me away a little bit.
Yeah.
And that one of the reasons I think why is because of the machines that I wanted to go fully cashless. And one of the reasons why I do want to make it as kind of passive as possible and not collect coins even.
Mm-hmm.
So, using either credit card at a kiosk or even the machines themselves. And I think the Speed Queens have I can't remember what they're called right now, but the touch, Quattro touch or something like that.
Quantum touch. Yeah.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Your industry. Is that what you use? Maybe we're getting too specific here for this call, but
yeah, that's brand new. That just came out like within the last couple months. So I don't have any of those machines. I've been hearing good feedback about them, but I don't have any of those. But those cashless payment systems, awesome, but are costly. That's the big.
I was hearing like 8,500 for a washer. Does that sound? Which I was blown away.
8,500 for just the payment system or for the washer?
Per washer, and then dryer could be about 6,000.
Yeah, it really depends on what size. Shoot me an email and we can talk about some specifics. That I'm sure. I mean, that's particular to you, but shoot me an email and we'll talk.
Cool. And then along those same lines, I heard that Speed Queen's good at financing them all. I know you talk about financing and stuff like that, and so that was good to hear. So I'm not laying out as much.
Yeah. Cool. They have some good financing terms for sure.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
And I'll say this as far as the, I guess the financing too. I mean, I'm assuming the SBA is also involved if you want to get financing for purchasing a business. And then I know they also do equipment financing, and they usually offer pretty favorable terms, especially now with everything that's been going on. I know that the SBA has really been pushing to try to help business owners and business acquisitions and, real estate, owner occupied real estate, et cetera. So.
Yeah, I will say that one of the downsides of being the mom and pop and having these inefficiencies is that the SBA will only fund certain laundromats. If they don't have good books, the SBA is very hesitant to land on a laundromat. So it will be location dependent in terms of the SBA. So
yeah, I mean, but if there's a real estate involved, maybe that could also incorporate.
Right.
There's different methods. So
yep.
All right, Gwen, do you have a question?
What is the difficulty of having a 24-hour laundromat? Is it the labor or?
Yeah. So, I mean, you have this push-pull for labor costs versus issues that you might run into if you don't have somebody there. And really, a lot of it has to do with what your location is. My unattended laundromat, I did 24 hours for a while, but I had a lot of homelessness issues, a lot of homeless people trying to sleep there. And I either had to let it happen and deal with the repercussions of that, or I had to, for a while, I would set my alarm at 3 a.m. and check my phone, the cameras on my phone, and see if there was somebody sleeping there. And if there was, then I'd have to, call the police, and then I'd have to go out to my laundromat. So it was really difficult to do. So obviously I didn't do that very long. Speaking of systems, I ended up closing it at 10 again. So you have these issues, like labor can be kind of expensive. So if you feel like you can support it overnight, having labor there, maybe you have a larger laundromat, then yeah, that's good. If you want to go unattended, then it will be area dependent. Some areas can do it just fine and you won't have too many issues. I'm in, Los Angeles, so homelessness is a pretty big problem here. And it turned out to just be too much for what I was trying to do. So those are your main issues. Vandalism also can be an issue at night. Although surprisingly, I didn't have as much of that as problems with homelessness.
So I have a question real quick.
Mhm.
So as Joe was mentioning, the opportunity for, let's say that you want to buy a building and then, maybe there's either a residential component or there's some other mixed use component and you want to incorporate, a laundromat on site. So let's say you buy a small strip center, there's already 2 or 3 existing tenants and then there's just a vacant space. And instead of trying to lease it up, you decide, hey, I want to, just put in my own laundromat.
Mhm.
Could you kind of talk about some of the factors you need to consider? I know we kind of talked about, the potential impact fees, et cetera, but could you kind of elaborate a little bit more on, I guess, any other things you need to consider?
Yeah. I mean, you want to know that the area can support a laundromat, obviously. Very rough rule of thumb is about 15,000 people per laundromat. And that's very rough. It really depends. So, if your town has 30,000 people and there's already 2 or 3 laundromats, then you have to figure out if you're going to be able to essentially take business from these other laundromats enough to where you'll survive. And more than likely, not everybody's going to survive in that scenario, right? So that's a very rough estimation. So you want to know what your competition's doing. And, is there a bunch of older equipment? Is it somebody who's not reinvesting in their business? Well, that's where the big opportunity could come in. If you come in and invest into a business, maybe put in some new equipment or even just slapping paint and flooring on the walls. Paint on the walls and flooring on the floor. But figuring out how you can kind of come in and add some value to the laundromat. So you want to know kind of what the competition is like. You want to be in a place that's visible. If people can't find your laundromat, then it's going to be more difficult to be successful and not just see it, but also access it. So if it's like on a one-way street, or if somebody has to do a U-turn in order to get to it, maybe not as big of a deal there as it is maybe here in LA where there's a laundromat every 2 blocks, but still something to think about. But what I love about that scenario is you have an opportunity to not only build a business that can be a great cash flow business for you, but by doing that, you're really going to strengthen the value of that real estate. And so one of the things I encourage people to do if you're in that scenario is charge your laundromat top of the market rent. Like, don't go beyond that. Obviously it's got to be reasonable, but charge it top of the market rent if the laundromat can afford it, because your commercial real estate is valued on a cap rate that's going to be a lower cap rate than if the value of the laundromat, right? So for every $1 of cash flow your laundromat makes, the equity's, $4, right? $4 gain in equity. Well, even at a 10 cap, for every $1 of cash flow your real estate gets, well, now it's worth $10, right? So it's worth it to move that cash flow from the laundromat to the real estate, because you're going to build equity a lot faster in your real estate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, we see it a lot with like what's known as a sale and lease back, where someone owns the real estate and then they sign a long-term lease at a certain dollar value, and then they sell the real estate to an investor at a particular cap rate, and then they just get a significant infusion of cash that they can use to go buy, other businesses or whatever else. So that's super common.
Yep. Yep. And it's a good opportunity with laundromats in particular. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I got another question for you, and this is probably a nerdy question. But so coins interest me for some reason, more so recently. But I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he said something about I can't remember what kind of business. I can't remember if it was a laundromat or what, but they're a business that produces coins. And so, first part of my question is: do you pretty much just recycle your coins, or do you produce more coins than you? Like, do more coins come in than you can have use for, so you have to turn them to cash?
No, I have the opposite problem.
Okay.
Where people
So you
come
have to
in, yeah, people come in to get coins to use the bus. I don't know what they do with all the quarters they get, but I end up
Right.
having to buy quarters. So I'll people will get coins from the change machine, use them in the laundromat or not, but use them in the laundromat and the machines. I'll empty the machines, put them back in the changer, and take the bills to the bank, and either deposit it and buy some more quarters if I need to.
So when you buy quarters, it's just a one-to-one buy, right?
Right.
You don't have to pay extra.
Right.
The reason I'm asking, he was telling me that whatever business this is that this person has, they're one of the casinos, the local casinos, is buying the change from them for more than face value of what the change is worth, because the
Yeah.
casino is basically trying to get lots of coins. And I thought that was very interesting.
Hey, there's some more value for your business right there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
That's my point. That's my point.
yeah. Especially when that coin shortage was happening, that really rocked a lot of laundromat. That hit
That
a
might have
lot
been
harder than the
right. That's what.
pandemic.
Yes. That's what I was. So I partly because of the coin shortage or whatever that was going on, but it just made me think of, laundromats and the coins and all that stuff, and this whole talk of going to like a cashless society maybe in the next 10 years or 15, 20 years, whatever it is. It makes me wonder about change businesses and how that's going to work exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Start,
Well,
start accepting Bitcoin, right?
That's right. Hey, I
we
like
gotta
some
have those,
Bitcoin right now.
you gotta have those wireless machines, right?
Yeah.
But sorry, yeah, I just couldn't resist my change quick.
No, it's a good question, but it's a one-to-one transaction. And maybe if you're a super high volume store and you need, I don't know, $5,000 or $10,000 a week of quarters, maybe the situation's different. But for most laundromats, it's going to be a one-to-one transaction for sure.
Perfect. Cool, man. Awesome.
All right. So I think we have enough time for one more question, if anyone has any.
All right.
Otherwise, we'll let's check Facebook. Okay. So it looks like we don't have any more questions. I mean,
I answered them all, man.
I know, man.
All of them.
We were just slinging them at you, and you were just like,
yeah.
And I enjoyed this tonight. I've not really ever thought of doing the laundromat thing before, and this is very interesting to me. So
yeah, well, good, man.
Man.
Yeah, feel free. Anybody has more questions that come up down the line, feel free to be in contact, and I'd be glad to answer them and help anybody out if I can.
Oh, for sure. And then again, we record this meeting, so it will be on YouTube.
Awesome.
If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Gwen, do you have anything you'd like to say prior to? It looks like you have your hand raised. I just want to make sure we address your question.
The dry cleaning, is that that to retain the customers, or is that any profit in that? I mean, can you just outsource it to another company or? Yeah,
that's dry cleaning is a tricky one because they're related businesses, but they're very different businesses. And I would say dry cleaning tends to be a lot more hands-on of a business. There's a lot more owners who are, I would say, self-employed dry cleaner owners than laundromat owners, who can be a little bit more business ownery where they're not working in their business. But also COVID really impacted laundromats and dry cleaners very differently. I think the dry cleaners who survived this whole fiasco will be probably stronger than when it started, but I think a lot of dry cleaners aren't going to survive just because, people aren't going to work. They're not wearing the clothes that need to be dry cleaned nearly as often, or they haven't been, right? So the dry cleaner, there's a lot of laundromat / dry cleaners, but I think you'll find that a lot of the owners are working the dry cleaner side of that a lot of times. The margins aren't, it's hard to get the margins to be able to hire other people to do it full time if you own one dry cleaner. So with that said, a lot of owners, what they'll do, whether they do drop off or pick up and delivery laundry, a lot of what they do is they partner with a dry cleaner and outsource it. Yeah.
And another thing with dry cleaners you got to be careful with is, you know, there's contamination possibility. We have a lot of issues on the commercial real estate side where if there's been a dry cleaning plan on site, there can be some environmental issues which you may have to remediate. So that's another thing. So just be very careful with that.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again, really, Jordan.
Yeah,
I'm really excited
my
we were able
pleasure.
to have you on. And again, if you guys are watching on YouTube, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And again, Jordan, we'll see you guys next time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Jordan. He's super helpful and always looking to connect with people who are interested in the laundromat industry. So
Definitely. Thanks, guys.
all right, guys. We'll see you next time.
See ya. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Bye.